A good fight should be like a small play, but played seriously.
What's happening, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how to quickly get a bot up and running with Masquerade.
What's this?
For those of you who don't already know, Masquerade's a TypeScript-based bot development framework, and the idea behind it is to make composing Puppeteer actors super fast and super stable. Out of the box, it provides a bunch of things like browsers such as Chrome and Edge, but also anti-fingerprinting browsers like multi-login and Incodition. Heroku's Oak Cliff framework provides a really high-end CLI experience, and Microsoft's T-Syringe delivers a fast, lightweight service container for type-safe inversion of control. There's also a growing number of battle tests that we call additions that you can use to test your actors against known detection vendors. Most importantly though, Masquerade's designed to be super easy to extend, meaning the ecosystem can develop with custom evasions, auditions, humanizers and so on, and it clips straight into your project. So with that out of the way, let's look at how to get started.
I'm ready.
Before we get started with the installation, we just need to make sure our environment is set up correctly for development. To keep things short, I'm going to be demoing on Windows here, but you can check the doc for guidance on Mac and Linux. All the commands and requirements are the same. You need to be running at least Node 14 and TypeScript 4.
Alright.
So to get started with the installation, if you're using VS Code, then we can quickly clone a repo like this. But you can call up whichever Git CLI you prefer and clone the Masquerade.js/Masquerade project. Okay, so now that that's cloned, we're just going to switch into the new project directory. By default, it'll be called Masquerade, so that's what we're going to use here. Before we start building a new bot, let's just have a quick look around the directory structure. In the root, you'll notice all your tooling like ESLint, Prettier, tsconfig, and editor config. So make sure your IDE, whichever one you're using, is configured to pick them up and keep all your code neat.
How so? I'll be too busy looking good.
But now let's switch up to the main application folder, because that's where we're going to be doing most of our work today. You can see there's a commands directory here, which is currently empty. It's a config directory, which you can see as some configuration files that are used to define what modules you want to load, such as browsers and auditions. We won't get into the dependency container now, but whatever's in these maps is going to be available to the app. Contracts folder is your typings directory, where you can define any custom types or interfaces you need. Hooks are a bit more complicated to explain, but the main app hook here is what bootstraps your application prior to each command running. Providers are the loaders for your app. They'll generally pull in instructions from the config maps we looked at earlier, but the main exception is the config provider, which naturally can't access itself prior to loading, so we need to define it here. Schemas are your validators. We use Zod for that. And the main one you'll start with is your environment validator, which lets you set all of the default rules for your .env file.
Gentlemen, let the tournament begin.
So going back to the modules directory, you can see we have an acts folder here, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. The first thing we're going to do is spin up a new act. To do that, we're going to use our command line tool. If you prefer Linux, you can use WSL. Just make sure you've got all of your binaries installed locally there for your browsers. But for today, we're going to use PowerShell just to keep it all native in Windows.
Your style is unorthodox, but effective.
So this is the website we're going to be scraping. It's called Ecosia. You may have heard of it.
Yes, indeed.
They're an amazing company out of Berlin who've been turning revenue from Google searches into trees in deforested regions. If you aren't using them already, it costs you literally nothing, and you'll be saving the planet just by typing your Google searches into Ecosia rather than Google.
Wise decision.
So Masquerade provides a nifty little make command, which we're going to use to quickly scaffold up new framework elements.
Your skills are now at the point of spiritual insight.
There's a lot we can choose from, but we're going to choose an act today. It's going to ask us what we're called, and let's just make it Ecosia Demo. I'm going to describe the purpose, which is to demonstrate how easy it is to automate with Masquerade. So we want to tightly scope our scenes. So the first one we'll use to perform search, and the second one we'll use to scrape the SERPs. You can see here that it created the files that we're after. So we're going to jump straight into the perform search logic. You can see here that it's made us a very basic run command with a couple of examples. We're going to delete those examples as they're just a placeholder. You can see that when we delete that, the linting will start to complain, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. First thing we need to set up is some default options for this scene. And then we're going to start an action, which essentially loads the page to find in the URL. You can see here that, again, the linting is complaining due to TypeScript.
Excuse me, fellas.
So let's set a default for the URL, just in case it wasn't already set. Once that page is loaded, we're going to look for two different elements, one being the search input box and the other one being the submit button. If we don't have both of those elements, we obviously can't proceed, so we will just throw a typed error and abort. So once we're certain that we have those elements,
We know everything. We can prove nothing.
we can click on the search box. We can type with a slight delay between keystrokes, wait for a little bit of a timeout just for humanization, and then click the submit element. So this is a very basic set of logic.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
After we've clicked the submit button, we'll just wait for the navigation to transition to the next page and then return the current URL. So onto the scraping scene. You can see it starts out very much like the last. We can delete the boilerplate logic here and start configuring. We want to basically abort immediately if we did not end up on an Ecosia search result.
Never.
So the first thing we want to do is look for the results container. And we can have a peek at what we're looking for here just by inspecting the page and finding the elements that we're after.
You must remember, the enemy has only images and illusions. Destroy the image, and you will break the enemy.
If we can't find the container element, we want to essentially abort straight away. So let's handle our on-page scraping. So we want to start a new results container and dig into that element that we found with evaluate, which will run some on-page code. So this is a very simple bot.
I know I don't have much time.
So all we're going to do is query selector all within the container div for every result div and extract the title, URL, and snippet. And we can find those tags in our source and extract the correct items. And finally, we're just going to do a bit of validation. We mentioned above that we only wanted the file back, so we're going to slice the array at that limit. If we didn't receive anything back, we're just going to add a scene failed error to our result and return. So the final part of this process is shaping the transports for our data. So transports can be anything from console to database to cloud logging. Anywhere that you can send data, you can use it as a transport.
It is not the art, but the combat that you enjoy.
You can see here that we've got a default console transport which just styles the data as JSON. So we're going to create a basic table using the Oakwood CLI. So for the scrape scene, we'll make a table with title, URL, and description. We will make the title green, URL blue, and add some truncation for the description. One last thing we need to do before our app will run is to provide it to the app. Scaffolder won't automatically do this, as most of the time we'll be spending some time in development before being ready, so we don't want it interfering with our existing application. All we need to do is go into the axe config in the config directory and add it to the map. Alright, so time to run our bot.
When the opponent expands, I contract. When he contracts, I expand.
We do this with the Masquerade act command, which you can see will bring up a list of all the acts enabled in our application. We're going to select our demo act. It's going to ask us which scenes should be performed. We're going to say all. We only have a console transport, so that's what we'll use. Although we can select from all these available browsers, for the sake of this demo, we'll just use Chrome.
It's first class.
So you can see the scenes executing in the background, while in the foreground, the automation is happening.
I see your talents have gone beyond the mere physical level.
And as expected, we received a table with our results. Now, obviously this would normally be transported to a database or cloud, depending on your use case, but for this demo, showing us in the console is enough. This doesn't really touch the surface of what you can create with Masquerade, but it should give you a really good idea of how the basic flow works.
I have several questions.
So after watching all of that, you might be wondering why Masquerade is needed for such a simple puppeteer task. The answer is it's not. If all you need to do is log in and scrape a simple page, then chances are you don't need Masquerade for your project. Where it really starts to shine though is multi-step, complex bots, and also the ability to access the ecosystem of the community-driven plugins and pre-made actors. So where it would make sense to use Masquerade for a simple bot is if you're very new to automation and you think you might benefit from an opinionated framework that'll answer a ton of design questions for you.
What is the highest technique you hope to achieve?
You can find all of this documented in the documentations at docs.masqueradejs.com, so make sure you read through that.
Do you understand?
Which leads me to the community. If you're into botting, scraping, account orchestration, or any sort of automation-related interests, check out the community Discord at discord.masqueradejs.com.
It's a great way to recruit new talent, huh?
The server is run by Thurston, who's the creator of the infamous Puppeteer Extra, which is also, coincidentally, the underlying Puppeteer driver that provides a huge number of free evasions for your bots. And check that out here. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you on Discord. And I want to thank you in advance if